Old Frank never turned on the air conditioning in his Arizona home. He used to say that the dry desert heat was but a pale shadow of that humid, sticky suffocation that had once seeped into his very pores. He sat in his rocking chair, thumbing an old Zippo lighter engraved with the silhouette of an F-4 Phantom. "You want to know what war smells like, kid?" he asked, without looking at me. "It doesn't smell like gunpowder. It smells like jet fuel, rotting leaves, and a fear that tastes sweet, like overripe mangoes." Saigon was a world away. We lived at the base in Da Nang. The first time I saw my F-4 Phantom II, I fell in love. It wasn't a machine. It was a snarling beast, a twin-engine monster capable of carrying enough explosives to level a small town. But inside the cockpit, you don't feel like a god. You feel like a prisoner in a glass jar. My first sortie was a hot dawn hunt. The sun was just breaking over the South China Sea, spilling liquid gold across the water. The beauty was enough to steal your breath. Then the dispatcher's voice crackled in my headset. "Blacksmith 1, we have a hot zone in the A Shau Valley. Infantry pinned down, requesting a grid wipe." I exchanged a look with my radar intercept officer, Mark "Goose" Miller, a kid from Ohio who wrote poetry in his spare time. That's a bad omen in war, thinking too much. We flew low. From above, the jungle looks like a solid green carpet, peaceful and still. It's a lie. Beneath that canopy, 1,000 eyes watched us through the sights of anti-aircraft guns. "Smoke visible!" Mark shouted. From the thick of the brush, a thin plume of purple smoke rose. Our boys marking the target. They were down there in the mud and the roots, while we screamed by at the speed of sound, separated from them only by a thin skin of aluminum. "Rolling in," I exhaled. I dropped the nose, the world tilted, blood rushed to my head, and my G-suit squeezed my thighs to keep me from blacking out. In the reticle, a sea of green. I pulled the trigger. Napalm isn't just fire, it's an orange death that spreads like jelly. When the canisters tore away from the pylons, the plane shuddered as if sighing in relief. I yanked the stick back, clawing for altitude in a vertical climb. In the rearview mirror, I saw the jungle bloom with fiery flowers. In that moment, I didn't think about the people down there. I only thought about not clipping the treetops. The whistle of the wind in the depressurized cockpit drowned out even the roar of the mangled engine. We were losing altitude so fast, the palm fronds looked like the teeth of a giant saw, ready to shred the fuselage. Goose was silent, either from the G-force or pure primal terror. I pulled the stick back until my knuckles turned white and the capillaries in my eyes began to pop. "Eject, Mark!" I screamed into the comms. "The hydraulics are gone! Get out!" He didn't answer. I looked back and saw his head lolling aimlessly against the seat through the cracked, blood-streaked canopy. A piece of flak had punched through the glass. Mark was alive, but his helmet was a mess of red. I couldn't leave. I couldn't pull the yellow handle knowing he'd stay trapped in that iron coffin. We didn't hit the ground. We hit the river, a muddy yellow artery of the Mekong. The impact felt like hitting a concrete wall at full speed. Darkness, silence, only the gurgling of water filling the cockpit. I woke up to the cold. Water was at my chin. It smelled of burnt oil and river silt. By some miracle, the canopy had jammed open on impact. I crawled out, slicing my arm on a jagged edge of duralumin, and dragged Mark out. He weighed a ton, so it felt. We crawled to the bank as distant shouts echoed through the brush. The Viet Cong were already coming for us. For 3 days we were ghosts. We ate roots that tasted like soap and drank water that made our insides cramp with agony. Mark was delirious. He whispered poems about the snow in Ohio, about how cold it gets in January, while we sweltered in 40-degree humidity. I gripped my .45 caliber Colt, praying I wouldn't have to use the last bullet on him or myself. When the Jolly Green Giant, the rescue helicopter, finally hovered above us, I didn't believe it. I fired flares into the sky until I ran out, sobbing with exhaustion, until a steel cable descended like the hand of God. Coming home was worse than the jungle. When I stepped on the tarmac in California, I expected, I don't know what, maybe respect, maybe silence. Instead, I got a milk carton thrown in my face by a young girl with flowers in her hair. "Baby killer!" she shrieked. I stood there in my dress blues, a medal pinned to my chest, feeling the white liquid run down my cheek. I wanted to tell her about Mark, who is now a permanent resident of a VA hospital with hollow eyes. I wanted to tell her how the sky over Hanoi turns black with flak, but I just stood there. We became a generation that won every battle in the sky, but lost the war at home, in our own living rooms. I couldn't sleep. Every rumble of a truck on the street sounded like a 37mm shell. My wife left a month later. She said I hadn't all come back, that my soul was still flying somewhere over the A Shau Valley, looking for a target that didn't exist. I started drinking. Bourbon helped drown out the hum of the J-79 engines that haunted my nights. I saw faces of people I never knew, villagers running from the shadow of my plane, soldiers I covered with fire, and those I was too late to save. Frank's final flight wasn't in Vietnam. It happened here in Arizona, 40 years later. It was a flight of remembrance. I bought an old Cessna, a tiny, slow machine, nothing like my Phantom. I took to the air as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert in the same hues the jungle once wore. I flew until the city lights faded and there was only darkness and stars. I pulled the old Zippo from my pocket, the same one. It hadn't worked in 10 years, but I flicked the lid anyway. Click-clack. That sound was the most honest thing in my life. "We're home, Goose," I whispered to the empty cabin. I knew that tomorrow I'd wake up screaming again. I knew the Agent Orange they sprayed us with would eventually burn out my lungs for good. But up there, at 3,000 feet, there was no politics, no protests, and no shame. There was only the clean sky, which knows no borders and remembers no evil. I banked into a steep turn, feeling the G-force press me into the seat. For one brief moment, I was that 20-year-old kid who believed he could touch the face of God. Then I leveled out and headed for the landing strip. The war was over. Finally, it was over for me.